Now we're ready to attach the chipboard for the boiler to the base construction. And let's talk about how we're going to do this. We're going to use some construction strip to join the boiler piece right here. Then we'll use wet glue to go around here. We'll use another construction strip at this end, and then we'll finally have one that attaches the front piece together. So I have those construction strips here, and I've cut them a little bit differently. These are the two that are going to join they'll go here to join the boiler to this place. And I cut these strips all 1 inch wide. I've scored them in the center at 1/2 inch. There's 3/8 of an inch wide score tape on one side and on the other side. And the reason it's like that is because this side has to go underneath, but then this side over here is what will attach to the base. And then to make the join for this part, I again have a piece that's 1 inch. I have not scored this, but I have two pieces of 1/2 inch score tape on, so that we'll be able to make that join. And I've sized these to length here. Mine were, this was 3 3/8, and I think this one was, can't remember, 4 1/2, I think. So whatever size you need here is what you would cut. Alright, so, and I also have a couple of rubber bands at the ready. And I'm going to do this in a couple of stages. I'll put the construction strip on here first, and then glue to just past where the dowel goes in, and let that set up. And then I'll come back and do the other part. So just so that I know, can kind of keep everything in line where I want to stop, I'm just going to take a marker and just kind of put a dot on each one of these places, so I'll know don't go with glue past this point. Now the only place you want to be a little bit careful of what's going on with your glue is up here around the end of the boiler where it meets the cab. Now if it ends up not being too pretty, if you get a glue mess, we can always come back and do some trim on that. And if it so don't get too concerned about it, but just try to be neat when you're working around, any area that has finished paper on it. So let's start by making sure we've got this oriented correctly. So here's our hole, so I know I want to start down here, and I'll add one of my excuse me, strips, and it will go underneath towards the back. I'll just line up that crease. And I'll give that a good burnish. And then in the front here, we'll add this other strip, and just put it to the halfway point where you've got your score tape. So if you peel back one side of this, you can use the other side as a guide to know where to align it. I'll give that a burnish as well. And I think I'll go ahead and add this strip on as well, just because it'll be easier to do it before everything gets attached, and I'll have an opportunity to burnish it down. So I'm just kind of holding it over here so I know exactly where it goes. Go. Okay, so now we're ready to first put on this strip back here. And when we do that, you recall that when we were doing our fitting here, we made a tick mark up here so that we could keep things in a line, and we're going to come right along the edge here. So I'm just going to fold this up out of my way. Oh, can't see that tick mark very well because of this piece of stuff, so let's see if we can figure out if we can keep it straight here by, make sure you're straight tight up against the cab here. I'm just lightly putting that down at first. I think since I can't see that tick mark there, I'll just bring this all the way around. Make sure everything is fitting properly. And once I've checked that out, then I can come back here and give this a burnish. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so now time to put wet glue on each of these support pieces. I'm only going to go up to the black dot. I'm going to kind of work quickly. I'm going to try not to be too messy back here at the back. I'll get out my detail gluer, I think, for back there. So I'll get all of that glue on. So I have my glue all around, and I'm ready to go for it. I have a piece of short dowel here. This is one of those times when you have to hold your mouth just right. Make sure it stays flush up against that cab as you come around. I managed to find a smaller piece of dowel. Got that in there. So I'll just wrap this around the rest of the way. I'm going to put some rubber bands on it. Kind of checking to make sure that everything is where I want it. It should be flush against the cab, and also if you have a spare piece of chipboard, you can make sure that that's sitting flat up there on that end as well. These ends should be meeting. I have to give mine a little encouragement. There it goes. So then it's just a matter, I'm going to let that set up nice and tight, and then I'll be back to glue the second half on. So I've let this glue set up. Now we should be ready to move on to finish gluing the remainder here. And we'll also want to take off that score tape backing. And also, let's put some glue under where this tab will be. So I'm just kind of pulling this tab back. Getting that stuck down. Pull that backing off. Okay, so now we're ready to put glue on the remaining parts here. So now I have my glue all around. I'm just going to make sure I continue firmly around and stay close to the cab in the back. And then put my thumb kind of on there. I'm not going to tack this down real well yet. And then around here on the front, bring this around to meet. Once that's meeting well, I can see I've got a little bit of a glue coming out back here. Now I can burnish that down. Burnish this down. Very carefully here because there's some places that aren't supported as well. That looks pretty good. So we'll let that completely dry and then we'll be back. Now we're ready to add this final support piece into the front here. But before we do, we're going to cut an additional slot here for the light platform. The light platform is double thickness again. The dimensions are in the cutting guide. It's 1 7/8 by 1 1/2, and it gets doubled up. And this is going to just give a more sturdy place for the front light of the locomotive to sit on, because it's going to be kind of cantilevered out in front of the locomotive. So just get that set up. Okay, and then so this is an 1.5 inch wide, as I said. Our slot, as we know, for the boiler extension was 1 3/4 inches wide, so we can just use this to draw an outline, because what we need to do is just kind of put a little slit here in the top. Sorry, a little slit here. You can see where I've drawn this one, hopefully, so that this can fit in there. So it's 1.5 inches wide, centered on this 1 3/4 inch opening, and it's 1/8 of an inch tall. If you have a sharp craft knife, you won't have any trouble cutting that out. So I'll cut that out and then I'll be back. So now that I have this piece cut out, I'm going to just cut a couple of little extra support pieces from, this is, we reserved some of these cutout sections from when we made the boiler supports. You remember they fit in here like this. So I'm just going to take a couple of them and line them up, get them centered here, so I can see how tall they need to be, and then just use my craft knife and slice that off. So now we have these two pieces, the light platform and the front, and these two pieces that we just cut can get glued together. So now these are dry, and I'm going to take my light platform and center it and make sure it goes all the way back against that last support piece that's inside of here. And I'm just going to draw a line here so I know how far to put my glue. You can use the double thickness of chipboard on each side to help you center, because this chipboard is 1/16 of an inch thick, so we've got 1/8 of an inch on this side, 1/8 of an inch on that side. I'm just giving it some pressure for a moment there. And then these little pieces, they're going to fit down inside here along that back support piece. And you should be able to just kind of hopefully drop them down inside of there. Just take your bone folder or something and get them so they're sitting up right against that light platform. That'll just help give it a little extra stability. And I'll let that set up and dry for a moment before I put the outside ring on. And now that that's set up, we can insert our last support ring here. I'm just going to run a bead of glue along the inside. So I've run glue, I think you can see all around there. And then it's just a matter of getting this to fit in. You might need to use like the blade of your craft knife or something to encourage it to fit around some of these places. It should fit flush with the ends of the boiler. But don't push it in too far. And you should have a nice flush fit. Just making sure everything is flush there. Now we can let that dry, and then we can work on our decorative paper. Now for the decorative paper, we're going to start out by taking a measurement, and that is to check the length of the boiler from where it meets the cab to the end of the box. And in my case, that is 3 3/8 inches. So you'll measure yours and see what that is. So when you hear me say 3 3/8, it'll be whatever your measurement is. So we're going to start out with a piece of paper. Pretend this is our decorative paper. I always like to start out with a scrap piece of paper just so I can make sure that I have what I want to have. And we're going to come in 1 1/4 inches from the left edge. 1 1/4 inches from the left edge, and make a mark down at that 3 3/8 or whatever yours is. Now I'm just going to use a post-it. That's what I would use on my decorative paper too. That's going to help tell me where to stop scoring. So I'm going to take my scoreboard. I'm going to score at 1 1/4 inches until I hit that post-it. Okay, 1 1/4 down to there. Now we want to make a cut that comes in and meets that 1 1/4 inch score. So I'm just lining up my ruler here, and I'll take my craft knife and I made a cut right to there. Alright, so now that score goes right there at the base, and make sure you have it tight up against the cab, of course. And then you just wrap firmly, and if it makes you feel better, you could put some temporary adhesive over here. And then we'll come all around here to this side, and with your bone folder or your finger or something, we're going to just make a crease right along where that is meeting. Try not to come past the edge of the box, okay? So we've made that crease. And then I again want to cut in 3 3/8 and up to meet that line. 3 3/8. Just up to that line. And fold back on that, make sure it's straight. So now get these in place here. Now what we want is to have the seam come along the middle of the bottom here. So I'm just wrapping the underneath this side that's longer underneath. We don't have to have, you know, that much of an overlap. I would say there's probably an inch and an eighth or so. We only need about a ½ inch. So I'm just going to draw a tick mark so that I have about a ½ inch overlap. And then I know I can cut off this part here. So I'll cut off up to that tick mark. I think I'm going to cut off about a ½ inch. And then for these flaps here, they only need to be, I would say, about 3/4 of an inch. So come in, you can do this on the wrong side of your paper and make a line and trim these off to 3/4 of an inch. So let's pretend this is the wrong side of my paper. Trim that. Oops, I went too far. Make sure you pay attention. Good thing this was scrap paper, so you know, you try things out on scrap paper and then you know where you've made your, don't want to make your mistakes. So now this can come around like this, like this. Just be gentle when you wrap it around there. And then we're going to, after we get it attached, we'll make some cuts and wrap this front part to the front. So we started off with a piece that was 8.5 by 11. We scored in at 1.25 inches, and we made a cut up the distance of this, and then just wrap that around to get our paper. Now you can use this kind of as a template, but I would suggest to you that you measure and not just use this as a template. Now I can see right here that maybe where I measured this 3 3/8, maybe it could stand to be just a little bit more, because there's just a little bit of binding going on there. So I think that's why I like to make a trial run. I think I'll cut this just a hair bigger than 3 3/8 here, so that I don't run into any binding when I go to wrap this around here. So I'm going to cut this out of decorative paper, and then I'll be back. Alright, I'm back with my paper cut, and I've done some preliminary score tape, and need to burnish that on still. But what I did was, this is the side I'm going to start with because that's where I've been starting. I ran one piece first all the way around the back of the boiler, and then one piece all the way around the front of the boiler, starting even with this line here, because that's where we're going to start. And then I it's important on the top to have a coverage of about 1.5 inches. If you don't have 1.5 inch wide tape, just add some extra tape so that you have good coverage on the top, so that when we add all of the other pieces of the locomotive, the paper will be well adhered. And then I just kind of, you can see how I've spaced it out there. And then underneath here I've run a strip along the bottom and a strip here. And then on the paper, so this is the edge that comes around the front of the boiler, so I've added tape all along that, and then tape on these. This is on the tab here. Here I cut this a little short, but it's not going to be a problem, so that's why I have an extra piece of score tape on there. I just wanted to show you that it won't be a problem, because that part gets hidden. So even though I made an error, life will still move on. And then I just took the end of the blunt end of my awl and poked in where the dowel is going to go, so I'll be able to see that. So in order to do this, you just have to take a deep breath, make sure you're going the right way. And what I usually like to do is, we're going to start here with this long piece, I think, and we want to get that flap right in the right place, and make sure you get it butt up against this edge. And what you might want to do is make sure you've got it in the right place right there, and I'm kind of holding a really strong grip on it up here, and I'll take off the backing, but I'll make sure that it's held in place correctly all around, and then I'll adhere this strip right there. So let me do that. Kind of hold it up so it won't get on there prematurely. Get that all the way around there. I've just attached this corner here where my thumb is, right there. That's all I've attached for right now. And I'm making sure that it's up against the cab and coming all around properly. And now I can stick down the rest of that tab there. So now I have this much adhered. So I'm just going to come around here, kind of work my way up. Sorry, my tape's in the way. Move this back so you can see it all. I'm just peeling it back a little bit at a time. Sometimes the trickiest part is just getting a hold of the backing, isn't it? Alright, so there we go for that. And as I come up and I put a little pressure on there, I'm making sure that this is wrapping and staying right next to the cab. And as I got that right next to the cab, now I can follow along and put that down. And I'll just kind of move my way around here. And I'll just keep doing that until I get over to this other side. If there's anything I think that would be particularly of note, I'll stop and come back and show you. But other than that, I'm just going to pick up and go a little bit at a time, take my time, get everything lined properly. and I'll be back when I've worked my way around to the other side. So I've worked my way around to the other side. I just have this flap to put on here. Put that down. And then here on the front, this side is going to go underneath, so I'm going to make sure I get all the squirt tape backing off. And then I'll wrap this side tightly around. And then I can take off this backing. So I took off this backing and also brought this top piece back a little bit so that it can wrap around there. And that'll come around that way. And there we go. And then here on the front, I'll just make a series of snips and fold this in to get a nice edge along here. Probably have to cut back a little bit when I get to the where the light platform is, just because it's kind of going to stick into the way because this is a 1/2 inch. Yeah, I probably will. Sometimes I take off the backing and then snip. Sometimes I snip and then take off the backing. It just is kind of a matter of personal preference, I think, for that kind of thing. But all you want to do is just make a series of snips all around there and then push everything in and get a nice edge on there. So I'll do that and then I'll be back. So hopefully you can see this. What I've done is I've snipped about, I would say 3/16 of an inch or so, a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch all the way around, and then I've gone in and folded in every other one just a little bit so that I'll eventually put that row down and then put the in-between ones down, and that kind of gives it a smoother finish. But what I'll do here before I do that is here where I'm going to run into the light platform, I can see how much I need to trim off, and I can just come in with my scissors and do that before I push that down. So now that I have, let's say the odd ones pushed down, I can come behind and push in the even ones, and I'm just trying to make sure that using my thumb, that I get a nice, as nice of a round edge as that you can when you're working with flat paper. And when you're trimming off these ones that are up here near the light platform, just be very careful because your scissors can stick since you've already removed the score tape backing, and it'd be easy to tear those tabs. So just take your time and kind of support them as you work on them. Okay, so I'll give everything a good burnish, and I'll probably ink around this edge up here, and yeah, I don't need too much. And also I want to say, don't worry if you've got a gap here. We're going to do some trimming around places, so it's a very forgiving project that way. So don't be concerned if you've got a little gap. The trim I'm going to use is about 1/4 of an inch wide, so you could see it would cover a multitude of problems if you were to have some. So that's adding the decorative paper. We'll add some trim next.